the Labour government is still refusing to call what's happening a genocide and a war crime, then they are going to disagree with any question that starts with the premise Israel is committing war crimes, ethnic cleansing, or genocide.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Israeli government approved a plan to officially conquer Gaza. And just yesterday, Minister Smotrich vowed that Gaza will be entirely destroyed and that the Palestinians will have to leave in great numbers to third countries. This comes at the end of the extermination of over 50,000 Palestinian men, women and children, and something at the same time simultaneous expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank, something I witnessed with my own eyes last week. So will now the Prime Minister finally acknowledge that ethnic cleansing is underway and to end all UK military cooperation with Israel, especially the illegal provision of F-35 fighter jet parts, or will he risk make Britain complicit in war crimes and be the Prime Minister to see Britain answer at The Hague for its role in this atrocity?
Well, Mr. Speaker, most of what he says is simply not right. But can I address? I do want to address the position in Gaza and the West Bank, because it is increasingly intolerable, and I am deeply concerned, particularly with the lack of aid that is getting in and the impact it's having on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals. That concern is something I recently reaffirmed to the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, where I asserted again that a two-state solution is the only viable approach for peace. And our focus is on delivering peace for Palestinians and Israelis, returning to the ceasefire, getting the hostages out, and humanitarian aid in that is desperately needed in greater number and more quickly.
What did Shockat Adam say there that is simply not right?
I've been trying to work that out as I was watching back.
Shall we take his points, like one by one?
Yeah.
So, this week, the Israeli government approved a plan to officially conquer Gaza.
True. That's true.
Yes. And just yesterday, Minister Smotrich vowed that Gaza will be entirely destroyed.
True.
This comes at the end of the extermination of over 50,000 Palestinian men, women and children.
True.
At the same time, simultaneous expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank.
True.
Something that he witnessed with his own eyes. That is also true. What parts there are incorrect? Like, is so disingenuous to just lie about this. And
I think you have to disagree with the premise that he said, will the Prime Minister finally acknowledge that there's ethnic cleansing underway? Yeah. So is he disagreeing with that wording?
Yes. But then,
or like illegal provision of F-35 fighter jet parts, or it's hard to see what can be taken as incorrect in any of it.
I mean, the Labour government is still refusing to call what's happening a genocide and a war crime, then they are going to disagree with any question that starts with the premise Israel is committing war crimes, ethnic cleansing, or genocide. And perhaps one of the reasons they don't want to call it genocide is because then there would be an impetus because then the Labour government would have to act if they were calling it a genocide.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And it's just kind of makes you feel a bit sick not to engage with the meat of the question.
The longer it goes on and the longer there's reluctance. I mean, only yesterday afternoon, I think it was, the Taoiseach said that what's happening currently, like it was the first time, especially with Ireland being considered one of the more pro-Palestinian countries in Europe, was the first time that the leader of the country, well, outside of the president, the leader of the country said that Israel is committing war crimes, which now means that there's an impetus on Ireland to act properly to prevent war crimes. So there's things like, there's been the longest story in The Ditch, which is an independently owned organisation in Ireland that have been reporting on parts and weapons destined for the IDF flying through Irish airspace. Ireland being a neutral country should not be allowing that kind of military hardware to be going through airspace or stopping over to refuel or whatever. And so these things are conversations that are being had actively in Ireland now. given that there's been an acceptance and recognition of what's happening. It is terrifying to see one of the most powerful countries in Europe refusing to engage with the facts of what's happening, especially a prime minister that wants to fucking clockwork orange people into watching Adolescence and hasn't said a single thing about the Louis Theroux documentary.
Yeah.
And like, if you had one question from an MP asking about the Louis Theroux documentary, I wonder how he'd respond to that. Of like, well, the same way he thinks that Adolescence is a podcast, he might think that Louis Theroux was like an anime or something. Yeah. Like, it's terrifying to see that level of engagement with something like this.
Yeah. I suppose it is maybe a good thing that he isn't engaging rule by television. That's the only positive thing that I can say about this. And it's the extent to which Israel has sort of forecast these plans to kind of take Gaza are like just extraordinarily well reported. If you'd simply watched the Louis Theroux documentary, they had that insane prayer circle thing at the border, and with like the map with all the proposed settlements. Was not like in the Trump team. They were talking about like Trump Gaza as like a resort, or something like that, like a waterfront resort. And they're talking about buying waterfront property. You are being willfully ignorant. You're saying black is white at this point.
I think one of the things I find frustrating is earlier this year, back in January, I went and spoke to Sarah Champion, who's a Labour MP, and she's also the head of the International Development Committee. And I asked her, well, why aren't the Labour government calling this genocide? Like, here's all the evidence. Here's how many deaths. And she said, we can't call it genocide because that's a legal term. So it has to be ruled that by somewhere like The Hague or the ICC. But that will only happen after the fact it's happened. They're saying they can only apply the term genocide to what's happening retrospectively, which I think is some sort of strange Kafka-esque loop to be in, where you can't call what you're seeing what it is.
Well, he's Mr. Law. He's obsessed with being a lawyer.
I wish he was more concerned about humanitarian law now.